Hello and welcome back to the world beyond the ice walls, third map, the second ring beyond the ice walls. This is a new episode of this series. I am very glad to get back to this. It's been a long while, I'm aware, but we're back to it. As I said in the last video last week, I had a little pause moment for creativity reasons, and with last week's video, today I will make a new video and it will be the continuation of probably my greatest series ever, The World Beyond the Ice Walls. So, the last episode we did on this, which was over 3 or 4 months ago at this point, honestly, I think about 3, was on the lands right in this area. We had the land of Formosa Ultima, the land of the Broken Moon. We probably did the Italian Isles, the cities of giants, and we of course, and I remember this quite well, we did the garden or the primordial garden of Eden, which is right here. And we have been doing this for a long while, so a bit of a throwback for those that don't know what we're doing. This is a map that shows the world and the isles and the continents that are beyond the ice walls. The ice walls being, of course, the Antarctic continent, which in this map is shown to have multiple gates. These gates are where you pass through, going outside the actual Earth of the 7 continents, which is this one, or 6 or 5 continents. Every country has their own definitions of how many continents there are, but I don't care. I'm just gonna mention there's these gates, like the Leviathan Gate, the Sentinel's Gate, the Tiger's Gate, and the Serpent's Gate. And once you go out of these, you can access the Atlas, which is this region outside of the ice walls. But we have already covered the entirety of the Atlas, and we're now covering what is after the Atlas, after the other ring, which is not Antarctica, but in this case, the Mountain Ring. And outside of the Mountain Ring, there is the lands of Akupara. And outside of them, there's just complete wastes, as we can see in these corners. So we have been covering, starting from, I believe, Weldrum right here, in this direction, every single landmass that has been on this map. And after last episode, seeing Aden, we have to now move on to the south, to the Ouroboros Sea, to Terra Nova, to Amun-Ra, and maybe even Singularis. So let's get right into it and start with the first of these continents. So we did in the last episode the Thousand World Sea, which was this enormous ocean that contains so many little islands and islets, and these might seem small on this map, but remember, this world is huge, it's gigantic, way bigger than the continents inside of the ice walls. So something akin to like one of these little islands is still the size of an island like Sardinia or Crete, or even bigger. So with these Thousand World Sea, we saw that it ended in the south to 2 new continents, and these continents might be the largest ones we've covered yet. I'm gonna zoom out on the map, but I'm pretty sure that excluding, I guess, Asgard, which was a whole deal of it itself, and the Greater Lemuria continent, the biggest continents are indeed Amun-Ra and Terra Nova. We will start by the one that connects the Thousand World Sea with another sea, the Shin Deep Sea. The Shin Deep Sea, as I understand, is basically a deep ocean which is full of trenches, submarine trenches that can be seen even outside of the water because of its fluorescent life forms that inhabit this area. So although these, in I guess this lighter color right here, are trenches, it appears so that they are lighter in color than the rest of the ocean because it is filled with fluorescent light, such as fluorescent fishes, as they already exist and you probably already have seen some, and of course types of algae and corals that also have fluorescent attributes to them. But now let's actually get to the main dish. Terra Nova, the legacy of Suminia. So Terra Nova, let's first look at the geography of this place, because as I said, it's pretty huge. It is very diverse in its geography, but there are some factors that we can see and that influence parts of its territory. So first of all, we can see that there's a tropical area right here on this island, in this island chain, this archipelago that is right off the coast of the western part of this continent. Then in the north we can see a large desert that is filled with mountains, and there is even another tropical area right here on the border with the Thousand World Sea Islands. There's also another mountain chain right here in the north, and we can also see that there are a couple main rivers going in this area, which can probably sustain a lot of life. Same can be said for the rivers here, which seem to be more in a like fertile plain kind of inhabited, and we can see something that actually makes a lot of sense considering the position of this continent. There is an area of this continent which is directly connected with the volcanic wastes. I think I already mentioned the volcanic wastes in the last video, but in case I forgot to mention them, this is a large, insanely huge landmass which has no end to it as of known, that is filled with blazing infernos and continuously erupting volcanic wastelands, which basically produce a lot of fumes and debris that fall all on the eastern side of the continents that are in this part of the map. And in this case, they actually affect the Terra Nova continent quite a lot. In fact, we can see here that they literally share a border, and this entire area right here is basically uninhabitable because it is filled with these fumes. But these fumes also have nautical ways of arriving to the land, and we will see this later with Singularis. But for now, what is important is that not all of this island is inhabitable for humans or for any life in this matter. And we can see even here, there's a little red area right on the eastern tip of this continent, very much not good for survival. But now let's actually get a bit to talking about this continent. And of course the land is important geographically. In fact, it is at least interesting to mention that it is filled with precious minerals, and that not only that, but it is also perfect for human settlement in this central area because it is very, very, very fertile soil-wise, of course due to the vicinity of the volcanic wastes. Of course, it has also a volcanic, origin, so a lot of this land is fertile for that reason. So now that we got a bit of information on the land itself of Terra Nova, we can start talking about what this actually means, this subtitle, this description of the continent itself, the legacy of Suminia. So what is Suminia? Okay, so there's this whole theory, and let me preface everything else by saying this. There's this whole theory that long before humans even existed, there was a super advanced civilization that at least controlled vast parts of the world and that arrived to basically the same technological level, if not even the better one than we have now. But a certain sequence of events collapsed it completely and left almost no trace. Now, we can say this pretty much about, those that are inside of the ice walls in our world, I would say. There's no much trace of, ancient super advanced civilization, and that trace that there is not usually enough to really explain much, but just to give an idea. But in the case of outside of the ice walls, in Akupara, in Terra Nova, this is completely different. There lived once upon a time in this land a race of beings called the Sumnites. They were a corrupted version of humans, which looked human-like but not to our same extent. This is because they were closer to their Theraspid ancestors, which roamed the earth long before humans. Theraspid being one of the common ancestors of all mammals, but, if they departed way further back from humans than we did, then of course it would be a very different kind of life form. They had mastered ancient technology and were able to set up settlements all across the world, but their long-standing civilization was ended during the Permian-Triassic extinction event, which is similar to the theory of the Younger Dryas extinction, stating that a prehistoric advanced civilization was wiped out millennia ago and we were left with no traces. And yet, this is not the case for this continent, because although yes, the Sumanites are not here anymore, and it is basically uninhabited when it comes to intelligent life forms, there is factual proof that this actual civilization existed on this continent. In fact, it is, although now uninhabited, filled to the brim with traces and scattered remains of the Suminian civilizations, like megalithic ruins, artifacts, large stone embellishments, and so on and so forth. And you can find them all across this continent, even in the areas next to the volcanic wastes, which means one thing, that of course the civilization was very widespread, and the second thing, maybe the volcanic wastes weren't as much of a waste when these guys were around. This is as far as I managed to figure out when it comes to the legacy of Suminia. And since this Suminian race is now completely extinct, we don't really know how much they could have looked like us. They might not even look like us. There's a lot of theories going around that there were some sort of reptilian humans or reptilian creatures living alongside humans and maybe even against us nowadays, but there's not a lot of proof for it, and it is like an interesting concept. And this kind of dwells upon it and develops it by saying, yes, there was like a race similar to humans, but it was a different one. It had common origins with humans itself, and it went extinct way before humans even reached that amount of like intelligence to actually do something about it. So this is it for Terra Nova, the legacy of Suminia. Now let's move to another continent. So before we actually get to the meat of the video, or Amun-Ra, the stronghold of the Nephilim, I actually want to spend a little time looking at this continent right here, Singularis, the Isles of Extremes. So this title alone should tell you that something's up. You know, it's definitely something weird. It's not regular. It's extreme. So, you know, says it by itself. So what exactly is Singularis? So first of all, geographically, it is an island, but it is filled with island chains and archipelagos, both on the southern end and northern end, and even the eastern end right here. Even by just looking at the map, you can see that something is wrong geographically. It seems like it's literally just filled with any sort of type of habitat and like climate. You can see like a desert here, but then there's oasis inside the desert, but it is filled with prairies apart from that. But there's hills here, and then there's deserts that are similar to the hills here. Then there's mountains here, but it's also tropical. And then there's swamp land here, and then another desert, and then another swampland here. So even just by geography, it doesn't make any sense. And you will probably wondering, well, how did it get there? This just looks weird. It doesn't make any sense. Well, it actually explained by the simple phenomenon that we already mentioned, the volcanic wastes. So the volcanic wastes, what actually happens when there's like a eternally big landmass that extends for, I don't even know how much this is, honestly. Millions of kilometers, something like that, millions of miles, who knows? But yeah, it's pretty large. Let me say that, okay? And when all of this is happening, and there's like blazing infernos, blazing hot lava going on, fumes going around, these fumes eventually reach these continents. There's no wall to separate them from the wastes. It's not like with the mountain ring right here, it's not like with Antarctica. There's nothing to separate these continents from the volcanic wastes. So eventually these fumes reach the Singularis Isles and have a little effect on them. So the particles in the air of this island, which is contaminated by the fumes coming from the volcanic wastes, makes a person's fear and dopamine receptors turn off, inspiring all sorts of dangerous ideas and behaviors, which means that a human, when he arrives to Singularis, is completely torn apart by all these instincts that are fighting together. So, and this is not only for humans, anything that lives on this island has the same reaction. So you can see here these kind of like weird geographic patterns. They're constantly changing and reverting to one and another because all life on this island is like corrupted. It's nonsensical. It's completely changing, metamorphosizing every single second of the day. So once again, probably not the best place to live in if you actually manage to escape the ice walls, the mountain ring, and so on and so forth. But you know, it's definitely interesting to me that a place like this could even exist. But I guess, you know, wastes and fumes are known to poison the mind and do all sorts of weird things, even create hallucinations. I think a lot of time ago, when I covered the area in the first ring beyond the ice walls, I think one of these continents right here, I believe it was the Jura, yeah, God's hallucination, also had a kind of similar dynamic when it came to like this sort of like collective hallucination sort of deal. And I guess Singularis could have a similar kind of dynamic with itself, where although in that case it was inspired by some sort of mushroom, I think. It's been a while, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But in this case it's for the fumes, so people just go insane, basically. They go insane, they probably want to do bad things. I'm not even going to mention the type of bad things, but all bad things probably. And also good things, because it is just extremes. It is one side and the other at the same time all together. So completely avoid this island at all costs. So this was a little injection of knowledge when it comes to Singularis. But now let's get to probably the best part of the video, which is Amun-Ra, stronghold of the Nephilim. So I know for sure some of you read this Nephilim part and went like, finally, this dude is talking about this. It's been too long, it never mentioned this. Or at least I think I never mentioned this. I don't think so, right? Nephilim? I don't think I ever made a video on that. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Nephilim. And this continent, man, it's really huge. It is huge. The northern part, tropical here, tropical there, then this is plains, steppes. It's literally just a huge steppe. It reminds me kind of like the steppes of northern Eurasia, where Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Russia, and so on and so forth, the so-called Tartarian Empire was. It reminds me of that, honestly. And also there's like a huge lake inside, which also reminds me of the Caspian Sea, right here. It also passes, I didn't notice, but this red line right here is supposed to be the equator of this ring. Every single ring has an equator. As you can see, these red lines that go all over. And the equator does pass on Amun-Ra itself. In fact, it does create this huge desert right here. But there are rivers and things like that like kind of coalesce here in these mountain areas. So, interesting. It has a peculiar geography. It also has this area right here, which is part of the mainland, or at least most of it, but it is connected by just a little strip of land, so not the best, I guess, not the best. Anyways, with that done, geography-wise, let's actually talk a bit about the continent history and what it actually is going on. Also, the Sea of Turan is here. Turan being like that whole thing with the pan-Turkist movement. Interesting. I believe that the Nephilim that live on Amun-Ra are actually called the Turanians. There's a whole thing. You'll see. You'll see. It's interesting. So, okay. So it's a giant steppe with fields that go on miles and miles, almost like there is no end. So first of all, let's actually talk, before we even talk about the Nephilim part, I want to mention this because the title of the actual continent, the name of the continent, doesn't seem to have too much link with the actual people that live in. Amun-Ra, or Amun-Ra, was the god of the ancient Egyptian pantheon. He was the major ancient Egyptian deity, which was a fusion both of Amun, which was a patron god of the city of Thebes, which was one of the most important cities in Egypt. Let's just go into Egypt. Right around here, I believe, was Thebes, or maybe a bit more south, something like that. And it was the major god of this city. And then, of course, Ra. You probably have heard about Ra, at least in the past, for sure. Ra was the sun god of the ancient Egyptians. It was the major deity of the Egyptian pantheon. And yeah, it was a pretty big deal because it was also basically the father of all the other gods of the Egyptian pantheon, apart from like some other major deities, but those were not as relevant as the ones that were actually sons of Ra. So what happened? Basically, Amun and Ra were fused together after some battles between the Egyptian cities went through, and at some point they fused into this like single entity, Amun-Ra, which was actually at some point in the history of the ancient Egyptian empire believed to be the only god. They became monotheistic under a single ruler, under a single pharaoh for a short while. He was very fixated with the idea that there was only a single god, and he decided that the single god would be Amun-Ra, which I think he would call Ammon, like A-M-M-O-N, if I remember correctly. This is something I studied a long time ago, but I had to mention it for the name of the video. I mean, for the name of the continent, because, you know, there has to be some link. I can't really find the link, but there has to be some link. So one thing that I hypothesized is, I've read that basically there's like these vortexes, there's these like spatial anomalies. We've seen them in the other series as well, the, what was it called? Nos Confundum series. Spatial anomalies all around, where basically there's a vortex, like a portal of sorts, that opens up right in the land behind the ice walls, and it opens a portal to the land beyond the ice walls. So my only possible explanation for the link between the name of the continent and the actual god of Egypt is that basically the god of Egypt was inspired by something that was going on here. Or vice versa, who knows. Anyways, let's actually get to the Nephilim part. I know you've been waiting for this. So there's a lot to say about this. So the Nephilim were originally inhabitants of Earth, inside the Ice-Worlds. They were actually right around the areas of the Mediterranean, of this area right here, the Fertile Crescent, blah blah blah, this area right here. You know what I'm talking about. The area of like the birthplace of humanity, at least civilization-wise. They were described in the Bible, of all places, as mysterious beings with human-like appearances, but with a great stature and with power far exceeding those of the irregular humankind. In the Holy Book, it is unclear what their status is. There's multiple theories that explain what they actually are. Some interpret the passages that talk about them as them being simply creations of God like our humans, but gigantic in size. Here is where the whole theory and the whole current of thought that explains them to be simply giants. So giants, as they are mentioned many times in history, are Nephilim. They're the same thing, they're just another word for them. There's other theories that also believe that they're fallen angels. These fallen angels were the ones that were banished to Earth from heaven when they aided Lucifer's revolt in an anti-theist revolt against God. And they were punished, sent to Earth, just like kind of the first humans were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Similar kind of dynamic there. There's also another theory that believes that they are the descendant of Cain and Seth, so they are by all means humans themselves, just, big and gigantic. There's also other theories that say they were not literally gigantic, just gigantic in importance, and these are all the Masonic kind of theories, which believe that basically the Nephilim still kind of exist and influence human society to this day, and they're all the important figures in humanity have been Nephilim, and they just have abilities to control humans more than other humans have. For example, I don't know where I've seen that, but I've seen someone say that Elon Musk or King Charles are Nephilim, or descendant, partially Nephilim. It's a whole thing. But basically what happened is that after the Younger Dryas Cataclysm, which is what I was mentioning before with that whole theory that there was a super advanced civilization, but after that one, their civilization was basically destroyed. So the Nephilim were forced to leave the Earth, and after persecution in basically all the actual places they lived in the land inside of the Ice-Worlds, they decided to flee to somewhere safe. And this somewhere safe, as far as it was indeed the continent of Amun-Ra, which they began to settle and make their stronghold. They started setting up a new Nephilim-led society. There's even theories saying that they use human slaves for it, but there's no real proof, and of course nobody has been to Amun-Ra, so who knows, right? Despite this, it is believed that the descendants of the Nephilim still in part inhabit the 7 continents inside of the Ice-Worlds. Having mixed with humans and leaving their genetic trace, even physically, in famous humans, but most of all, tall ethnicities like the Balkan people of the Denarian Mountains, Denarian Mountains, the ones right here, and of course the Patagonian giants. We've probably heard of this. I mentioned this in one of my videos, I'm sure about it. There's this whole thing where the first contact between Europeans and the people in South America, the people from Spain and Portugal were like, yo, there's giants here. There's actual, there's 9-foot tall giants. What's up with that? And there's so many sources about this, and then from one day on another, people just stopped seeing these giants and they stopped believing that it exists. But there's so many accounts that at some point you kind of ask yourself, what's up with all these people seeing giants and suddenly nobody sees giants? Maybe they just went extinct. But then where's the bones? They hid it? I don't know. Something's up with that. And yeah, the explanation that this map makes is basically that they were Nephilim. They were Nephilim. They were part Nephilim, at least, descendants of them. So Amun-Ra, stronghold of the Nephilim, and Terra Nova, legacy of Suminia. These are the contents we've seen today, as well as the islands of Singularis. I think the most interesting one was definitely Amun-Ra, with the whole Nephilim thing. I think I might even make a video which kind of develops more on Nephilim, but I have to see if something or someone is interested. Because, yeah, this map is one interpretation on the Nephilim, but there's a whole thing Though I'm not sure if that just kind of bores people out because it's just religious talk, but you know, I don't really care. It's interesting stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this return to our beautiful exploration of the continents outside of the ice walls. We have come so far, and we're actually nearing, I guess not yet, but we're nearing kind of the end of the series. We only have this area right here to actually explore, which is, I guess, it's still a third, maybe a fourth of the map, so we're still more to go, but we're getting there, and it's been a long while. It's been at least 1, if not 1.5 years, so it's taking a while, but it will eventually be done. So thank you for watching this video. If you want to help the channel out, leave a comment in the description down below, and just let me know your thoughts on the video, and let me know your thoughts on these topics. If you actually want to see an in-depth video on Amun-Ra or just the Nephilim, that would be interesting. And yeah, I thank you for watching, and we will see each other next time. Bye bye.